The morning sun cast long shadows across Maple Street as 8-year-old Lily Henderson carefully adjusted the straps of her bright pink backpack, checking once more to ensure that her homework folder was securely tucked inside the front pocket. It was Thursday, September 24, 1987, and the crisp autumn air carried the promise of another school day, filled with the simple pleasures and minor challenges that defined third grade at Lincoln Elementary School. Lily's best friend, 7-year-old Grace Martinez, stood waiting on the sidewalk outside the Henderson family's modest 2-story home, her purple backpack slung over one shoulder as she bounced impatiently on her toes. The two girls had been inseparable since Grace's family moved to the neighborhood 2 years earlier, their friendship blossoming through shared interests in dolls, jump rope, and the elaborate imaginary games that they created during their after-school playtime. Despite the 1-year age difference, Lily and Grace were in the same third-grade class due to Grace's advanced reading skills, and they had become study partners as well as best friends, helping each other with homework and practicing spelling words together. Lily's mother, Patricia Henderson, stood in the doorway watching the morning ritual that had become so familiar over the past month since school had started. Patricia worked the evening shift as a nurse at the local hospital, which meant that she was usually home in the mornings to see Lily off to school before getting some sleep in preparation for her next shift. The arrangement worked well for the family, though Patricia sometimes worried about the responsibilities that fell to her 8-year-old daughter during the hours when both parents were working. Grace's mother, Maria Martinez, worked as a seamstress at a clothing factory that required her to leave for work before dawn, so the arrangement for Grace to meet Lily at the Henderson house had been a blessing for both families. Maria trusted Patricia's supervision and appreciated that Grace had such a responsible friend to walk with to school each morning. Lincoln Elementary School was located approximately 6 blocks from the Henderson home, a pleasant walk through a residential neighborhood that both girls had come to know intimately over the past year. The route took them along Maple Street for 3 blocks, then left onto Oak Avenue for 2 blocks, and finally right onto School Street for the final block to the elementary school. The path was lined with mature trees that provided shade during warmer weather and created a canopy of colorful leaves during the autumn months. The neighborhood was considered exceptionally safe by the standards of the late 1980s, with low crime rates and a strong sense of community among residents who looked out for each other's children. Most families in the area allowed their children to walk to school independently or in small groups, viewing the daily trek as an important part of developing responsibility and independence. Remember to look both ways at every intersection, Patricia called out to the girls as they prepared to begin their walk to school. It was the same reminder she gave every morning, part of the safety routine that she had established when Lily first began walking to school the previous year. Both girls nodded their understanding and promised to be careful, their eagerness to begin the day evident in their animated chatter about a spelling test they had that morning. Lily and Grace left the Henderson home at exactly 7:50 a.m., allowing plenty of time for their leisurely walk to school and arrival before the 8:20 a.m. bell that signaled the beginning of classes. The girls walked hand in hand along Maple Street, their backpacks bouncing slightly as they maintained the quick pace that came naturally to energetic children who were excited about the day ahead. The conversation during their walk centered on typical third-grade concerns, the spelling test that both girls felt confident about, their plans for recess activities, and their excitement about a field trip to the Science Museum that was scheduled for the following week. Grace was particularly animated about the prospect of seeing the dinosaur exhibits, while Lily was more interested in the hands-on physics demonstrations that their teacher had described. Mrs. Eleanor Thompson, who lived on the corner of Maple Street and Oak Avenue, was watering her front garden when the girls passed by at approximately 7:55 a.m. Mrs. Thompson had become accustomed to seeing Lily and Grace during their morning walks and often waved or called out greetings to them. On this particular morning, she remembered both girls seeming happy and excited, walking at their usual pace and showing no signs of distress or concern. "Good morning, girls," Mrs. Thompson called out, and both Lily and Grace waved enthusiastically in response, calling back their own cheerful greetings before continuing along their route toward school. This interaction would later become significant as the last confirmed sighting of the two friends, providing investigators with a precise timestamp and location for their final moments of normal routine. However, Lily Henderson and Grace Martinez never arrived at Lincoln Elementary School that morning. When the 8:20 a.m. bell rang and attendance was taken in Mrs. Jennifer Walsh's third-grade classroom, both girls were marked absent without any prior notification from their families. This was highly unusual, as both children had perfect attendance records and their parents were diligent about calling the school office whenever their daughters would be absent for illness or other reasons. The school's policy required that parents be contacted whenever students were absent without notification, so the secretary, Mrs. Ruth Bradley, called both the Henderson and Martinez households around 9:30 a.m. to inquire about the girls' absence. Patricia Henderson had been sleeping after her night shift and was confused by the call, explaining that Lily had left for school at the usual time and should have arrived before classes began. When Mrs. Bradley explained that neither Lily nor Grace had arrived at school, Patricia felt an immediate surge of concern. She quickly dressed and drove to Lincoln Elementary to speak with school officials in person, stopping by the Martinez home to inform Maria, who had just returned from her morning shift at the factory. Both mothers arrived at the school within 30 minutes, their worry evident as they tried to understand what could have happened to prevent their daughters from reaching their destination. The walk to school was routine and familiar, with no construction, road closures, or other obvious factors that might have caused the girls to change their route or delay their arrival. Principal Robert Chen immediately contacted the police department to report that 2 students had failed to arrive at school under circumstances that suggested something might have happened during their walk from home. Given the girls' ages and their established pattern of reliability, the school took the situation seriously and cooperated fully with the investigation that began immediately. Officer Maria Santos arrived at Lincoln Elementary at 10:45 a.m. to take the initial missing persons report and begin a preliminary investigation. Santos was a 12-year veteran of the police force who had handled numerous cases involving missing children, though most resolved quickly with children found at friends, houses, local parks, or simply having made impulsive decisions to skip school. However, the circumstances of Lily and Grace's disappearance were immediately concerning to Officer Santos. The girls were too young to have planned a deliberate absence from school, and their established routine and responsible behavior made it unlikely that they had simply decided to go somewhere else instead of attending classes. Santos immediately organized a search of the route between the Henderson home and Lincoln Elementary School, with officers walking the entire path and checking every yard, alley, and potential hiding place where 2 young girls might have stopped or sought shelter. The search also included interviews with residents along the route who might have seen the girls or noticed any unusual activity that morning. The search revealed no trace of Lily and Grace anywhere along their established route to school. However, the investigation did uncover one concerning piece of information. James Walsh, who lived on Oak Avenue, reported seeing an unfamiliar van parked on his street around 8 o'clock that morning. The van was dark blue or black, appeared to be an older model, and had been parked in a location where it could observe pedestrians walking along the route to school. Walsh had noticed the van because it was unusual for commercial vehicles to be parked in the residential area during morning hours, and the driver had seemed to be waiting rather than making deliveries or conducting service work. When Walsh looked again approximately 30 minutes later, the van was gone, and he had not seen it in the neighborhood before or since. The description of the suspicious van was immediately distributed to law enforcement agencies throughout the region, and investigators began reviewing records of vehicle registrations and any crimes involving similar vehicles. However, the description was too general to identify specific suspects, and no other witnesses reported seeing the van or its driver. Detective Carol Rodriguez of the County Sheriff's Department took over the investigation on the afternoon of September 24th, bringing specialized experience in missing persons cases to what was now being treated as a potential double abduction. Rodriguez was a 15-year veteran who had worked dozens of cases involving missing children and understood the critical importance of the first 24 hours in determining the outcome of such investigations. Detective Rodriguez's initial interviews with the girls' families revealed no obvious motives for their disappearance. Both the Henderson and Martinez families were well regarded in the community, with no known enemies, financial problems, or recent conflicts that might have motivated someone to target their children. The families had no connection to custody disputes or domestic violence situations that sometimes led to child abductions. The investigation expanded to include everyone who had regular contact with Lily and Grace, including their teachers, neighbors, and family friends. School personnel were interviewed extensively about any unusual incidents or individuals who might have shown inappropriate interest in the girls or other students. Mrs. Walsh, their third-grade teacher, reported that both girls had been excited about school and had shown no signs of distress or concern in recent weeks. They were good students who got along well with their classmates and had never mentioned feeling threatened or uncomfortable about anyone outside their immediate family and school community. The search for Lily and Grace expanded beyond the immediate neighborhood to include parks, shopping centers, and any location where 2 young girls might have been taken or might have gone voluntarily. K-9 units were brought in to track the girls, sent from the last known location where they had been seen, but the trail quickly became confused by the heavy pedestrian traffic along the school route. As the first day of the investigation progressed without any sign of the missing girls, the case attracted significant media attention throughout the region. Local television stations featured the girls, photographs, and descriptions, while newspapers printed detailed accounts of their disappearance and appeals for information from the public. The media coverage generated dozens of tips from citizens who thought they might have seen Lily and Grace, or who had information about suspicious individuals or vehicles in the area. However, investigation of these tips revealed no credible evidence about the girls' whereabouts, and many appeared to be cases of mistaken identity involving other children with similar physical characteristics. Patricia Henderson and Maria Martinez struggled to cope with the devastating uncertainty of not knowing what had happened to their daughters. The two mothers, who had become friends through their daughters' close relationship, supported each other through the initial stages of the investigation, while also coordinating with law enforcement and managing media requests. As days passed without any trace of Lily and Grace, the investigation began to focus on the possibility that they had been abducted by someone who had been observing their routine and had specifically chosen to target them during their walk to school. The timing and location of the disappearance suggested careful planning rather than an opportunistic crime. Detective Rodriguez worked with FBI behavioral analysts to develop a profile of someone who might target young children during their morning walk to school. The analysis suggested that the perpetrator was likely someone familiar with the neighborhood who had been watching the girls' routine and had chosen a location and time that would minimize the risk of witnesses or intervention. The first week of the investigation involved over 200 law enforcement personnel and volunteers, who searched a 50-square-mile area surrounding the girls' neighborhood. The search included urban areas, rural farmland, abandoned buildings, and any location where two children might be hidden or where evidence of their fate might be discovered. Despite these extensive efforts, no trace of Lily Henderson and Grace Martinez was found during the initial investigation. As weeks turned to months, the active search gradually scaled back to periodic reviews of new information and tips that continued to emerge from the public. The first anniversary of the girls' disappearance brought renewed media attention and fresh appeals for information, but also the painful reality that two young children were unlikely to survive for extended periods if they had been abducted by someone with malicious intentions. However, their families refused to give up hope and continued to work with investigators and missing persons organizations. Years passed with no significant developments in the case. Lily and Grace would have graduated from high school in 1997 and would have been starting their adult lives during the time when their case began to be classified as a cold case that was reviewed periodically but had no active leads to pursue. Patricia Henderson and Maria Martinez remained close friends, bonded by their shared loss and their continued hope that someday they would learn what had happened to their daughters. Both women became advocates for missing children and worked with organizations that supported families dealing with similar tragedies. The breakthrough in the case came in March 2019, 32 years after Lily and Grace's disappearance. The city was conducting a major overhaul of its aging sewer system, replacing pipes and infrastructure that had been installed in the 1960s and 1970s. During excavation work in a section of the system that ran beneath Oak Avenue, workers made a discovery that would finally provide answers about the girls' fate. Trapped in the collapsed section of the old sewer line, maintenance workers found a deteriorated backpack that appeared to have been in the underground system for decades. The backpack was purple and showed signs of extensive water damage and aging, but it was still recognizable as a child's school bag from an earlier era. City worker Tom Bradley immediately recognized the potential significance of the discovery and contacted law enforcement before disturbing the backpack or the surrounding area. Detective Jennifer Morrison, who had taken over responsibility for cold cases, arrived at the excavation site within hours to coordinate the recovery and examination of the backpack. Forensic examination of the purple backpack confirmed that it had belonged to Grace Martinez, containing school supplies, homework papers, and personal items that had been preserved by the unique conditions within the sealed sewer system. More significantly, the discovery led to a systematic search of the surrounding underground area that revealed human remains. The remains, found in a section of the sewer system approximately 50 yards from where the backpack was discovered, were confirmed through DNA analysis to belong to both Lily Henderson and Grace Martinez. The condition of the remains and their location suggested that the girls had been killed and their bodies disposed of in the sewer system shortly after their disappearance in 1987. The discovery finally answered the question of the girls' fate, while raising new questions about the identity of their killer and the circumstances of their deaths. The location where they were found was directly beneath the route they would have taken to school, suggesting that they had been intercepted and killed somewhere in their own neighborhood. Detective Morrison immediately reopened the active investigation into what was now confirmed as a double homicide case. The discovery of the remains and personal belongings provided new evidence that could be analyzed using forensic techniques that had not been available in 1987. Advanced DNA analysis of evidence recovered from the remains and the backpack revealed genetic material from an unknown male individual. This DNA evidence was entered into national databases and compared against samples from other crime scenes and known offenders, revealing potential connections to several unsolved cases involving missing children in the region. The DNA analysis also eliminated several individuals who had been considered suspects during the original investigation, including some family members and neighborhood residents who had been questioned extensively in 1987. The genetic evidence provided a clear direction for the renewed investigation. The DNA search revealed a match to evidence from another case involving a missing child in a neighboring state, leading investigators to focus on individuals who had lived in both areas during the relevant time periods. This line of investigation led to the identification of Robert Crenshaw, a maintenance worker who had been employed by the city's Public Works Department in 1987. Crenshaw had worked on sewer and water line maintenance, giving him detailed knowledge of the underground infrastructure and access to areas that would not normally be available to the public. He had also been questioned briefly during the original investigation, but had been eliminated as a suspect when he provided an alibi that was not thoroughly verified. Further investigation into Crenshaw's background revealed a pattern of behavior that made him a compelling suspect in the girls' murders. He had been arrested several times for voyeurism and had been fired from previous jobs for inappropriate behavior around children, though he had never been convicted of violent crimes. When investigators attempted to locate Crenshaw for questioning about the DNA evidence, they discovered that he had died in 2003, 16 years before the girls' remains were discovered. However, the investigation continued to build a comprehensive case against him, based on the genetic evidence and circumstantial factors. The investigation revealed that Crenshaw had apparently approached Lily and Grace during their walk to school on September 24, 1987, possibly using his position as a city employee to gain their trust. Once he had gotten the girls into his vehicle, he had taken them to a location where he killed them before disposing of their bodies in the sewer system, where he knew they would be unlikely to be discovered. The resolution of the case provided closure for the Henderson and Martinez families, though it also brought the painful knowledge that their daughters had been murdered by someone who had exploited his position of public trust to target vulnerable children. The fact that Crenshaw had died years before the evidence was discovered meant that he would never be held accountable for his crimes. The discovery of Lily and Grace's remains led to changes in how missing persons cases are investigated, particularly regarding the importance of thoroughly searching underground infrastructure that might be used to conceal evidence. The case also highlighted the need for better background screening of municipal employees who have access to sensitive areas and who work in proximity to schools and residential neighborhoods. Lincoln Elementary School, which had closed in 2005 due to declining enrollment, was converted into a community center that includes a memorial room honoring Lily Henderson and Grace Martinez. The room features photographs of both girls and information about their friendship, serving as a reminder of the lives that were lost and the importance of protecting children in the community. Patricia Henderson and Maria Martinez, now in their 70s, found some peace in finally knowing what had happened to their daughters, though the knowledge also brought renewed grief about the senseless nature of their deaths. Both women continued their advocacy work for missing children until their own deaths in recent years, having dedicated their lives to ensuring that other families would not suffer the same uncertainty they had endured for over 3 decades. The purple backpack that led to the discovery of the girls' remains was preserved as evidence throughout the investigation and legal proceedings. The backpack's survival in the underground environment for 32 years demonstrated how evidence can sometimes be preserved in unexpected ways, providing answers long after hope seems lost. The case of Lily Henderson and Grace Martinez serves as a reminder of how predators can exploit positions of trust and access to target vulnerable children, and how municipal employees with knowledge of infrastructure systems can use that knowledge to conceal crimes. Their story continues to be studied by law enforcement professionals and used in training programs for investigators who specialize in missing persons and child abduction cases. The neighborhood where Lily and Grace lived has changed significantly over the decades since their disappearance, with many of the original families moving away and new residents taking their place. However, a small memorial marker placed near the corner where Mrs. Thompson last saw them serves as a reminder of 2 little girls who were simply walking to school when their lives were ended by a predator's violence. Today, the route that Lily and Grace took to school is still used by children in the neighborhood, though safety protocols have changed dramatically since 1987. Parents are more vigilant about supervised transportation, and schools have implemented more comprehensive safety measures to protect students during their commute. The sewer system where the girls' remains were discovered has been completely replaced with modern infrastructure that includes better monitoring and security features. However, the case serves as a reminder that urban infrastructure can sometimes conceal evidence of crimes for decades, and that advances in technology and construction can occasionally reveal secrets that were thought to be permanently hidden. The friendship between Lily Henderson and Grace Martinez, which should have been the foundation for a lifetime of shared experiences and mutual support, was instead cut short by a predator who saw two vulnerable children as opportunities for violence. Their story continues to resonate with families and communities, serving as both a tragedy and a reminder of the importance of protecting the innocent and maintaining vigilance against those who would harm children,